Some opening shot thoughts. Over the decades, the Republican and Democratic parties have shifted their ideologies, constituencies, and positions on big issues. The old Republican Party was about states' rights and limited government. No more. Today, the party is led by President Donald Trump, who has clearly indicated the federal government supersedes states' rights, and more specifically, that there is more power vested in the presidency than most constitutional scholars believe the framers intended. Case in point, the issue of elections. Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution states clearly the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof, but the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations except as to the places of chosen senators. But in an emotionally charged truth post, President Trump said he would sign an executive order outlawing vote by mail, a widely used practice that is offered to every resident in some states. The president laid out his reasoning in the Oval Office while Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky looked on.
We're going to end mail-in voting. It's a fraud. If you have mail-in vote, even Jimmy Carter with this commission, they set it up. He said the one thing about mail-in voting, you will never have an honest election if you have mail-in. And it's time that the Republicans get tough and stop it, because the Democrats want it. It's the only way they can get elected.
But again, remember that article in the Constitution. It is a state's issue unless the Congress does something. But Jordan Levitt, a voting rights expert who teaches at Loyola Marymount Law School, says he doesn't even think an executive order would rise to the level of states having to sue the Trump administration.
States don't have to listen to a federal executive order. Executive orders tell the federal government what to do. They tell federal agencies what to do. But they can't tell state or local officials how to do their business.
And what's more, Trump's Department of Justice sent a letter to the Illinois Elections Board demanding its complete database of voter information, including driver's license number, date of birth, and home address. The board sent that amount of info. The board sent over the amount of info that state law allows, but the Fed said that's not good enough. It wants the complete data, saying in its most recent letter, quote, any statewide prohibitions are preempted by federal law. Case in point number 2, the federalizing of the National Guard. You recall the president called the Guard to help police an anti-ICE protests in Los Angeles. And this is despite the fact that Governor Newsom did not ask for it, and traditionally presidents do not federalize National Guard members unless the governor specifically requests it. So we know how Trump views executive power as nearly absolute, and anything that encumbers it, be it a judge's ruling, a state law, or critical coverage in the media, is simply wrong. Republicans who used to preach about limited government and states' rights have been silent on this nearly wholesale revision of their platform, either because they believe it or they know they have to go along with Trump to keep the base happy and prevent from being primaried. Either way, the Constitution is not an obstacle to be shoved aside. Sometimes it's vague, sometimes it's not. And when it comes to giving states the power to run elections, it's clear as day.
Coming up on Paris on Politics.
Tonight, Trump, Zelensky, the EU. We unpack today's summit for a peaceful settlement to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. A controversial new state law mandates mental health screenings for Illinois public school students. And the Department of Justice versus Illinois. Why Trump's DOJ is wrestling state election authorities for sensitive voter data.
This is Paris on Politics from Fox 32 Chicago.
Welcome to Paris on Politics. The high-stakes meeting between Presidents Trump, Zelensky, and major European nations has taken over the state capital today. The nation's capital, that is. But has it led to an end to Russia's invasion of Ukraine? President Trump issued a statement immediately after, saying they're laying the groundwork for a meeting between Putin and Zelensky. Fox News correspondent Caroline Shively has more from Washington.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and other European leaders arriving at the White House for meetings aimed at ending the war in Ukraine, and the stakes couldn't be higher.
The war is going to end. When it ends, I can't tell you, but the war is going to end.
President Trump is trying to get his Ukrainian counterpart to agree to a comprehensive peace plan centered on security guarantees for Ukraine in exchange for the recognition of captured land as Russian territory.
I'm optimistic that collectively we can reach an agreement that would deter any future aggression against Ukraine, and I actually think there won't be.
It's a tough sell. Zelensky points out Ukraine was given similar guarantees when it gave up land in 1994, but Putin attacked anyway.
I think we showed that we are strong people, and we supported the idea of the United States, of personally of President Trump, to stop this war, to make a diplomatic way of finishing this war.
But some European officials have said they see the U.S. offer to back the security guarantees as a game changer. And if they can convince Zelensky to sign on, the next summit could bring all three leaders together.
If this meeting today formulates a counteroffer and a guaranteed security strategy, we go to the trilateral meeting, Putin, Zelensky, and Trump.
And joining us with a full recap and analysis are Cecile Shea, an analyst with the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, and Jordan Gans-Morse, associate professor in the Department of Political Science at Northwestern University. Thank you both. Cecile, as we tape here, the EU leaders are still meeting with Trump and Zelensky. They're going to have dinner. What should viewers consider the big takeaway from what happened today?
Well, first of all, the meeting went about as well as anyone could have hoped. You may recall that the last time Mr. Zelensky was in Washington, there was a big blow up during the meeting. Zelensky marched out. The president was very unhappy. And this time, everyone seems to have gotten along. We don't know what happened behind closed doors, but there seems to have been a real push from a number of the European leaders for security guarantees for Ukraine. Now, what that means is an excellent question. Several of them brought up Article 5 of NATO, which would mean that an attack on Ukraine could be construed an attack on NATO. I don't think we're going to go that far, but it shows you how seriously the Europeans take this. And, you know, they don't just take it this seriously because they care about Ukraine, although I think they do. They take it this seriously because they don't want to be next. The president of Finland was there. He actually has a very close relationship with President Trump, and he has spoken quite passionately about not wanting Ukraine to have to go through what Finland has gone through since after the war, where it's constantly worried about Soviet Union and then Russia invading. It gave up some of its land in return for supposed security, but it hasn't really felt that safe. So I think that the Europeans really are trying to be very careful and work with President Trump and not just stop the fighting, but also ensure that Russia does not turn around in a year or 18 months or 3 years and either try to take more land from Ukraine, which is what Zelensky warned about in the tape you just showed, or perhaps try to move into Estonia or Latvia or some other country nearby. Yeah. All of those countries are really worried about perhaps showing any sign of weakness.
The Baltic countries, there are a lot of variables and concerns there. Jordan Gans-Morse, so it might not be exactly Article 5 since this agreement or potential agreement would not include Ukraine membership in NATO, but President Trump did leave the option open for U.S. boots on the ground as part of a security guarantee. What do you think that would look like?
He did, and that was perhaps surprising. I think I'd be very, very surprised if that actually comes to be, that we put U.S. troops on the ground. But I think the very fact that Trump has been willing to discuss security agreements and security guarantees is really the key to all of this. Otherwise, we're just going down the road that Putin already had wanted to go down, and that he seemed, as of Friday in the summit in Alaska, to be pushing Trump to go down. But the one part that would really set this apart from the past is if there's something concrete about security guarantees. Now, to the extent that Trump's envoys have begun talking about this, they're mentioning things like written guarantees from Putin. And that's just laughable that that's supposed to be some sort of guarantee. So the question again is really, like, where is going to be the substantive force? And if it's not the U.S., is it going to be something like France and Great Britain, perhaps on one side of the border, and maybe on the other side, something like China or Central Asia? That, to me, though, seems, as much as it might be a solution, very hard to believe that Putin is going to agree to any of the NATO members, such as whether it's the U.S., whether it's France, whether it's Great Britain, actually putting troops on the ground. But at least if Zelensky supports such an option, it puts the onus back on Putin and makes Trump irritated with him when Trump proposes something and Putin balks at it. And that's where Zelensky wants to push things, is such that Putin not Zelensky, is the one with the onus on him.
And it seems like the strategy here from Zelensky and EU leaders is Trump often will listen to the last advice that he hears and act on that. Cecile Shea, it does seem like it's a long shot that Putin would accept some kind of security guarantee. But on the other end, do you think that Zelensky and Ukrainians would ever accept a deal that would give over the Donbass region in the Far East there to Russia, as Putin wants and as Trump has signaled support for?
You know, Zelensky has said he doesn't want to. That's how this whole war started, was Russia wanted the Donbass, and Zelensky has said no. Might he be willing to give up a small sliver of it somehow in return for robust security guarantees? I don't know. They've suffered so much. And you know, do you want to be the president who looks a mother or a wife in the eye and says, you know, your son died for the Donbass, but I'm giving it to Russia anyway? It would be hard for him to give up much of that land, although if there is really a robust security guarantee with NATO troops on the ground, and I tend to agree with Jordan that I don't think Russia would ever go for that, you know, there might be some pressure on Zelensky to try. The first thing we have to say, and this is the point that I think all of the Europeans made today, is there has to be a ceasefire first. And Putin is saying there will not be a ceasefire first. He wants to go directly to the peace negotiations. And I don't think that's that's not going to be a good point for Ukraine.
Trump has seemed to echo those strategies. Jordan Gans, more, do you hope that he maybe shifts his thinking on that and says, okay, maybe we should do a ceasefire? In the Oval Office today, he was saying, we don't need a ceasefire. I solved, quote unquote, 6 wars and we didn't do ceasefires. So what do you think?
I certainly hope so, and I think Ukrainians hope so, not least of all because they're the ones who have civilians being shot at every night and being attacked by drones and missiles. The other part of this is that a ceasefire is something that could be implemented much more quickly, and part of what Putin is trying to do when he talks about these grand bargains, which of course appeal to Trump, just the very name of them, some grand bargain appeals to Trump, is that he's trying to delay, which is what he's done repeatedly. He wants to be able to, when he talks to Trump, say, I do want peace, but I want an even better peace than a simple ceasefire. And that sounds good to Trump, but in reality, what that means is that Putin's going to basically make a proposal that's going to be almost impossible for Zelensky to accept. Zelensky's then going to look like the one in Trump's eyes who doesn't want peace, and Putin wins as things get delayed. So yes, a ceasefire is really the much more practical thing and really should be what Trump should have been focusing on. And if I can add one thing to that, it would be he should never have let the leverage off that he went into the summit with on Friday, which was saying to Putin, if you don't agree to the ceasefire, which Zelensky's already on board, we are going to do serious sanctions, ramping up not only against you, but against countries that trade with you. And instead of using that leverage to his advantage, it suddenly disappeared. It's not in the conversation ever since Friday. And that's really a serious mistake.
So maybe a tactical issue in this ongoing 3D chess match with 3 people. And now they're saying they want to set up a trilateral meeting with Putin, Zelensky, and Trump. So more to come on this. Cecile Shea, Jordan Gansmore, thanks so much. We'll continue to talk to you as developments happen here in this incredibly important geopolitical issue. Thanks very much. A much debated new state law requires public schools in Illinois to implement mandatory mental health screenings for all students between 3rd and 12th grades. Advocates say it is to get students suffering from mental health problems the help they need, but opponents are skeptical of giving public schools that kind of authority. And joining us to talk about this bill is Senate sponsor, State Senator Laura Fine, a Democrat from Glenview, who has announced her candidacy for Congress in the 9th Congressional District, and State Representative Steve Reich, a Republican from Woodstock, who is not running for any higher office as far as I know. So let's start with you, State Senator Laura Fine. What does this bill do? What does it not do?
First, thank you so much for having us here tonight and for discussing this legislation. This bill is the result of hard work and negotiation, and we can see the result of it because it passed with unanimous bipartisan support in the Senate. And what this does is it really finds a way to make sure we are focusing on our children and their mental health. And what's so important is finding out if there is an issue early on so we can take care of that issue. And like I said, this was bipartisan. It was unanimous. It was the result of a lot of hard work. And as you mentioned, I'm running in the 9th district. I think we could learn a lot in Washington about how we were able to accomplish this here in Illinois.
All right, a bipartisan bill that has received some debate and some pushback. And as I understand, the Illinois State Board of Board of Education is going to kind of come up with exactly how this is administered. But Representative Reich, your thoughts on this legislation?
Well, it's the kind of bill that I wish had been discussed as deeply before it was put on the floor for a vote as it has been since it was signed by the governor. Unlike the Senate, the House was a total partisan vote on this bill. No Republican voted for it. Every Democrat voted for it. So the issues that are addressed in this bill, I think, are misguided as to where they're going to be addressed. I think that ISB is absolutely the wrong place for this type of screening to be done. I don't think there's been adequate thought as to who's going to do the screening, what's going to be the result of the assessments, how they're going to be treated in terms of putting children into therapy or whatever it is that they're going to be given. There's just been there was absolutely no discussion of any of these things before this bill came to a vote. And we wanted answers before we were going to put a vote on it, and we didn't get them.
All right. Well, then let's try to find some of these answers now. So, State Senator Laura Fine, again, the Board of Education is going to be coming up with some of the specifics here. But say a student is screened, I'm assuming by a physician or mental health provider, to have some sort of mental illness. Then what happens?
So these screenings, which I have to say are already done in some of my schools, and they're done very successfully. They are research-based, they are industry standard tools, and they identify students who may be silently struggling. And it really points parents in the right direction. I think it's a very important statistic to understand that in 2022, there were 83 children between the ages of 10 and 19 who died by suicide in the state of Illinois. That's one child every 4 days, or enough children to fill 4 classrooms. We use every tool we possibly can to save these young lives. And this new law is part of that solution.
And Representative Reich, as I understand in the law, parents can opt out of these screenings. Does that at least give you and other parents that are concerned some consolation here?
Not very much, because, you know, a lot of parents are going to feel like, well, this is something the school is saying I should have my child go through. And a lot of parents feel somewhat intimidated by the fact that this is the school system telling them that we're going to offer this and you can opt out. But, you know, I think an opt-in provision would have been a lot more strong, a stronger protection for parents. Schools are not the place to be doing this sort of thing. Schools are in the business of teaching kids how to read, how to yes, become social beings and those kinds of things. But the fact is they're not doing a very good job at that. And all of a sudden to pile a new mandate upon them that they are not qualified to give, and this bill does not describe who is giving these assessments, and telling them that this is another part of your job to provide this kind of information to whom we don't know. It's just way too much to be put into law right now.
I want to just
these assessments are going to end up with a lot of false positives, but by the time the false positives are determined to be false positives, you're going to have kids who are in the mental health system and are not going to be able to get out.
All right, Senator Fine, I want you to respond quickly, if you can, to those.
Yes, thank you. I completely disagree with many things. First of all, this bill has been in the works for a while, and we did it, again, painstakingly to make sure we can be doing this with successful outcomes. What we are going to see is this when this legislation goes into effect in 2027, so we are building our way up. We are also doing at the same time our 988 support system. We are working in Illinois to build our mental health workforce. We have built out the Beacon system to help Illinois families who have children who are suffering. We will have the tools in place. But what I think Representative Reich is missing here is one of the most important tools in this fight are the families and the parents. And the parents are part of the process the entire way through the process.
We have to leave that there. Fascinating discussion here, and we will keep monitoring this as, again, the Board of Education is going to start building out some of the specifics of this new law. So my thank you to Representative Steve Reich and State Senator Laura Fine. Thanks very much. We really love it here when you write in asking us to cover stories we might have overlooked. So I thank a viewer named Francine for writing in an email, quote, "I'm trying to understand the DOJ's request for voter information. In addition to personal information, name, social security number, etc., are they able to request a copy of one's voting record?" Francine, we looked into that today. The Department of Justice is indeed requesting all the data from Illinois' voter database, including much of that sensitive information that you mentioned. And it does have legal experts confused and somewhat concerned. In a letter dated August 14th, the head of the DOJ's Civil Rights Division asks Illinois Election Board Executive Director Sarah Matthews for sensitive data on Illinois voters, quote, including the registrant's full name, date of birth, residential address, his or her state driver's license number, or the last four digits of the registrant's social security number, as required under the Help America Vote Act. This letter came after the board responded to an initial request by sending over limited info on voters that protects personal data. It's the same info that the general public is able to purchase and something utilized by political parties. But the DOJ said that was not sufficient. Justin Levitt, an election law expert at Loyola Marymount Law School, says a Nixon-era law guaranteed that the federal government does not have a right to the information it's asking for.
Just because the public can get it, just because you or I can walk in off the street and get the voter file, or just because a campaign can get the voter file, doesn't mean the federal government can.
Levitt also says he's concerned that the DOJ has not outlined exactly what they plan to do with that info.
I shouldn't have to guess. We shouldn't have to guess. We shouldn't have to suppose. Federal law says you got to tell us before you start collecting our data.
Last week, Governor Pritzker stated he thinks the Trump administration is using this to try and, quote, rig the midterm election.
Well, it's clear why they're hunting around for voter data, right? They're trying to say that in the next election that there would be fraud because they know they're going to lose.
The request has come as President Trump has renewed his threat against mail-in voting today, saying he'll sign an executive order outlawing it. On this, Levitt also says the sole authority to run elections rests with state and local governments.
States don't have to listen to a federal executive order. Executive orders tell the federal government what to do. They tell federal agencies what to do. But they can't tell state or local officials how to do their business.
And we did reach out to the Department of Justice for comment on this. A spokesperson responded back, quote, no comment. And as always, keep up with all the news you need to know at fox32chicago.com and with the Fox Local app. That's it for us tonight, but we are back on Wednesday. Good night, everybody.